eyes may be able to see, but without a heart, you cannot feel.
What's up, everybody? This is Joyce Samuels, and you are tuning in to episode 89 of the It Will Come Show. And today we're going to be talking about 5 reasons why gated online communities are increasing in 2020. All right, so let's dive straight in. All right, let me bring this up onto the big screen. So, 5 reasons why gated communities are increasing in 2020. So today we're just going to be talking about what exactly gated communities are, 5 reasons why I think they'll become popular in 2020. Actually, they already kind of are, and future trends of online communities as per a few messages I came across on Twitter over the last 24 hours. So, first of all, what are gated communities? Gated communities are essentially any community that has sort of like a harder way of getting into them, right? So there's, of course, a lot of talk around inclusive communities and then exclusive communities. Interestingly enough, when it comes to communities, you're going to actually be better off if you have an exclusive community. And the reason for this actually relates to a previous episode where I talked about the Dunbar number, right? The smaller that groups are and the more intimate they are, the higher the trust, the higher engagement, etc. The larger a community tries to become, they enter the realm of a network. And so the gated online community is age-old. You know, this is something that we have been doing for time immemorial, and it's there to almost give us a sense of safety and security as well. So although we don't like to build, walls between us, interestingly enough, you will find that these naturally get resurrected when a group or a community's sense of safety and security is at the forefront. And we have got, we've got a Nat there. Hello, Nat. Nice to have you on board. So let me just get us back. Okay. So yeah, for those who are tuning in for the first time, welcome to the show. It is sponsored by the company Faya. If you want to check them out, it's at FAIA Corp, Faya Corp, on Twitter, and also on a website with the same URL. All right, so what are gated communities? Now, 5 reasons I think they'll become popular. So here are the 5 reasons. 1, isolation, I believe, will breed an increased sense of belonging. 2, unemployment will lead to new and innovative ways. 3, health concerns will lead to increased preference for security, and there are always costs or trade-offs, right, with each of these things. Confinement will force a reassessment of relationships, and a sense of belonging will lead to more intimate group sizes. Okay, so isolation and belonging, sense of belonging. So what I have here and why I'm showing him is, at the top you got there a velvet rope. And if you're not familiar with the velvet rope effect, it's essentially the principle you'll find at nightclubs, right? So if you've ever been to a nightclub, they'll usually put this out the front, even if there's nobody inside, all right? And the reason for this is that it often forces people psychologically to think that a lot more is happening, or it pushes people to quote unquote work their way in. And the reason for this is, it creates a sense of I was going to say anxiety, but no, anxiety is not the word, but exclusivity, right? And when you have this take place, right now with the global pandemic occurring around the world and us, sinking into a greater depression, it is a form of this velvet rope. Right? Instead of a velvet rope, you have the potentially 4 corners of your wall, of your room, and you also have, the instructions to stay at home, right? So you've kind of closed yourself off already. And so by isolating that, it increases a sense or desire to either break free or seek out a sense of belonging. Now, this is all going into the psychology part of just human beings in general, and then why we get pulled into these different forms of communities. And so you notice on the second picture there, now I just sought out a picture of any gang, all right? So gangs, the reason why they are generally quite popular is because they actually satisfy this sense of belonging factor. right, that everybody has. If they are feeling isolated, or if they feel like they're being left out of a community, etc., they will go to where they do feel a sense of belonging. And in that, they'll often do things that they might not otherwise in order to be accepted, right? So this is sort of like the yin and yang to everything that I'm sharing, right, about why I think gated communities will become increasingly popular. And of course, at the bottom, you've got, hopefully, ideally, a more organized or healthier community, right? So with the isolation, and this is why I said earlier, there are trade-offs, right? It's important that people are aware of what the isolation is doing to them in their seeking of belonging, right? So it's important to be aware that, because you're in isolation, you don't then just try to gravitate towards the closest group that gives you a sense of belonging due to the isolation. So you want to make sure that you're not entering some sort of dysfunctional community versus a functional. Okay, unemployment. So with the unemployment, right, and I think in the United States, right, millions have been sort of submitting their unemployment status, right, in droves, and definitely big concerns. But as a result of this, it may also force a lot of people to think of new and innovative ways to earn. And so with the gated communities also comes in with an opportunity to actually charge if you happen to be the one who's built a community yourself, right? So on the right here, this is just from a Twitter thread. There's a whole bunch of paid communities whereby essentially people will pay in order to join, right? A general membership-based business. And this is definitely a possibility for you if you are able to create a community that not only satisfies all these, these human qualities that people seek in general due to circumstances, but provides value. And so this is an opportunity for you to earn if communities are your thing and you're great at connecting or building such groups. You can put together something like this and use tools that are available on the web. And if you have any questions about which tools are great to use if you're seeking to build community, just comment below in the comments and we'll share those with you. Or I'll just create a new episode talking about the tools around building communities online. And so, yeah, I also put at the bottom there's a little graph, right? It's showing the current system makes connection between peers difficult because of fractured identity held by service providers. A blockchain system facilitates much easier connection between peers. Now, here they're talking more about just the connections. So, right, if we refer back to the previous slides, we're talking about isolation. And it's ironic because communities by nature, they generally clump to smaller groups, right? Because the smaller it is, the easier it is to maintain relationships. But then on the flip side, it can also isolate them from the rest of society. So there are some definitely innovative things taking place in the world right now, especially when it comes to blockchain tech, on ways that we can still keep like a meta sense of connection with everybody around us, but also benefit from the security and the sense of safety from smaller groups, right? So those are things to watch out for. All right, third one, health and safety. So yeah, talking about health and safety, when right now, especially with the global pandemic, people are really concerned about their health. People are afraid to go outside because of an increasing number of cases of COVID-19. I just heard about a friend's grandmother who also passed away due to COVID-19. Now, granted, she might have had pre-existing conditions that made her more susceptible to COVID-19, but then obviously COVID-19 was sort of the final blow. So yeah, to my friend Alex, if you're watching this, deepest condolences to you and your family during this time. So yeah, but during this time, right, people are going to have an increased concern around health and safety, and so you're going to start to see things come out that you might not have otherwise or might not have accepted otherwise. Certainly in Singapore, there was videos making the round about the robot dog, which came straight out of Black Mirror. And a lot of people in the West especially were really concerned about this because they felt like, oh no, police robot dogs, now we're giving up our freedoms and we're going to have police robot dogs like scouting everywhere and keeping an eye on us all the time, and we're losing our liberties, etc. But also this is something that we really just have to accept as our future reality in terms of technology is here, it's here to stay. And I'm not going to say things are going to get worse, but things are definitely going to develop. And we have to find a way to work in harmony with that, instead of always resisting what's new or what's potentially dangerous, right? That's just a fact of life. There's going to be a lot of dangerous things, and yet human beings still overcome them. So, yeah, in terms of how this relates to the gated communities, right? When people are seeking safety, they are going to want to sort of close themselves up a bit. And, you know, if you look through history, the biggest case study or example would be, you know, the Great Wall of China for China, right? When they became very insular, they built a massive wall around them to keep out the barbarians, you know. So just looking at sort of how human beings generally play these sort of situations out, and you'll start to see why there might be an increase, right, in these type of communities. And then, yeah, seeking security again, down below, this is more looking at sort of initiation ceremonies to, fraternities, right? Using that as an example. So very sort of strong communities often have initiation ceremonies or very strong onboarding processes and experiences. And this is because they're generally members of communities feel a greater sense of importance or feel more special when they've earned their way into a community, right? And this kind of goes to sort of another topic I was going to talk about today, but decided to leave it for a separate episode, which is around free is not always free, right? Things that we think are free often have a hidden cost somewhere else if it's not financial. And so if you're not going to be paying your way into a group or community, you will pay through the form of a potential initiation, right? And if it's a functional community, hopefully that initiation isn't degrading. It's more dignified. If it's a dysfunctional one, well, you might, experience something that you don't necessarily like or wouldn't do otherwise if you're on your own. So confinement, right? Fourth one. So confinement, I believe, will help sort of push people towards a reassessment of their current relationships, right? And as they reassess their current relationships, they will look at sort of improving those relationships. And so when they seek out, if you're not finding that at home, then you'll probably seek that elsewhere, online. And when doing that, you'll also seek more quality relationships, right? And that is definitely something you will find in more gated communities. Because the barrier to entry is higher, people have to work for it or may have to pay, there might be some form of exchange. They might have a perception that, oh, well, because I have to work my way into it, it's exclusive, then it's going to be more beneficial. I'll have, higher quality relationships on the inside. And then finally, fifth point is, a sense of belonging that is sort of generated by the previous points will also lead to seeking out smaller groups. So, and the reason for this is, again, I mentioned, right, smaller groups provides increased trust, increased sense of belonging because you know everybody, you'll know their names, right? The more nodes or the more members in a community, the harder it is to keep track of everyone. And so the seeking out of smaller groups would just become the norm. And we kind of saw this actually with Facebook when they changed their mission statement a year or two ago. It wasn't too long ago. And they went from being about, okay, we're going to connect the world to, oh, okay, I think now we're going to have to sort of help create more meaningful connections. And so they actually realized that Facebook groups were the way that they could help facilitate that in a far more effective manner than just simply connecting the world through a social network. Because at the end of the day, people seek out these smaller groups for that sense of belonging, right? And I put up there Wolfpack as well, because if you've been watching this show, we do have a private membership group, accountability group that's been running for the last 5 years called The Pack. If you want to learn more about it, it's just jointhepack.co. I will put the link in the show notes after this. And below here we have Slack. All right, so if you're not familiar with Slack, they are a team messaging app which has exploded in popularity due to COVID-19. And you will see that the way that they manage sort of smaller groups within a larger instance is through the use of channels. So through channels, you can have people join via topic, or you could have channels, private channels, to create smaller subgroups or subcommunities within the whole network. All right, so future trends of online communities. So let's have a quick look at this. Now I put this here because this was a thread, the thread I was mentioning that I came across thanks to @stringstory who mentioned me, and this was a really interesting thread about just sort of paid communities, a la gated communities. And so free communities tend to be noisy without a barrier to entries, right? So we were talking about this whereby with a gated community, right, the exclusivity of and putting up a barrier actually helps increase the perception that there's more value. Solution: paid communities have requirements, financial or otherwise, right? That just there's more potentially more professionalism, potentially more organization. And yes, this goes back to the economics. How free is not always free. As Derek Sivers says, the higher the price, the more they value it. All right, and you might remember that I put this as a screenshot. Here are some of the tools that you can use: membership tools, platform continued, yada yada yada. So predictions: communities will be built on exhaust data. All right, so this is looking into the potential future trends. A community built on continuous glucose monitors. Hyper niche media companies will be positioned for paid communities, right? So this is the power of small again. So people who have like a very niche group or community may actually benefit from this time during COVID-19. So paid communities have reverse network effects. Social networks have network effects. Paid communities have reverse network effects. 100%. And maybe I might do a separate episode on reverse network effects. Opportunities: don't use money as the only filter for your paid community. Price is not one-dimensional. It's time, risk, sacrifice. This is actually a really good and an important subject matter. So I was talking about how if you're not paying to get into a community, right? So let's have a look at some of these fraternities, at American universities. If you're not paying with financially, then you can pay with time and effort. And at the end of the day, if you've ever heard the wealthy talk about, true wealth is time, that's essentially what happens. Your time and effort is sort of the true wealth, and cash money is just a way of us sort of symbolizing that exchange. And so I think it's something for you to think about when you actually have a community, and in terms of thinking like, okay, if somebody can't pay financially, how can they pay perhaps in their time or effort? Right? This is why there's also volunteers. Right? People actually will give up their time even if they're not getting paid, because it might give them more of a sense of reward. Right? Because there are many people in the world who aren't motivated by money, but they might be motivated by that sense of like, I've done something to help through my time and effort if I wasn't able to give money. So let's go back in. Yep, price is not one-dimensional. Okay, build a paid community from your email list. Now, this is more just generally for networks. If you build up an email list, you've got the network side, but then turn it into a community. Gamification, this is just about turning sort of the way that your members engage or interact internally into sort of like a game, really, with like, leaderboards, etc. So essentially every sort of interaction within your community platform, people could actually earn points, right? You'll be surprised how many people are really motivated by this style. I've seen it throughout many different paid gated communities, and there are always portions of the population who love to compete with others for leaderboard points. They would rather that than money. Having a founding member launch, so this is to all the startups. Have a founding member launch, because that provides sort of like the exclusivity aspect again to people who take that chance with you at the beginning or launch of your community, right? And it's a great way to reward them. And so that motivation is recognition, right? So you're satisfying the recognition component of a community. Track the NPS. So the NPS and KPIs. NPS stands for Net Promoter Score, and it's used often to showcase, how many people will refer your product, community, etc. KPI stands for Key Performance Indicators. So this is just knowing your numbers, right? If you're going to take this seriously, know the numbers around your community, right? Host guest AMA sessions, right? So AMA stands for Ask Me Anything, and AMA sessions are great for just sort of bringing outside experts in to provide value to your community. Think twice before building a paid community using Facebook groups, right? So I talked about Facebook groups, yeah? And I'm actually probably more on this side. I don't actually build a lot of Facebook groups these days just because generally like to have sort of either my own platform or creating a different experience outside of Facebook, because it can kind of interfere sometimes with people's personal lives, and then it just becomes an overwhelm of all the different things that people have to keep track of. It doesn't stop you. It can work for different communities. Have shared struggles. Remember, members will justify the struggle. Yeah, 100%. This is actually why we have. I don't have it up, but in the pack, we actually have a guest lobby channel, and in the guest lobby, we, instead of doing like a free trial, right? We can't do it because we don't necessarily have a product. What we're selling is the community experience, right? And the value from that. And so a way of us getting around not having a freebie product is that we actually invite people into the guest lobby channel, and we get them to experience what the community like is themselves. Because we have such a high engagement rate from our community, guests will come in, they have to answer certain questions, and then members of the pack will actually respond to them live. So, we don't have to sell anything. The members and the community sell themselves, and then they go out and talk about it to others. But having that direct experience, because communities at the end of the day all about direct relationships, allows them to better understand what is actually here. It's far more effective, we found, than putting in a sales page and a list of all the traits and benefits in bullet point for people. Because if they experience it themselves, they'll feel it, they'll understand it. Create a group identity. Yeah, this goes without saying, and I'm not going to go through all of these because these are actually, there's quite a lot, and I actually love it. But I will share the link to this thread so you can see in your own time. But the last one here, create a group identity. This is by far, I think, one of the biggest things that are not looked at enough when it comes to gated communities or creating communities in general. Because people seek that sense of belonging, they also seek an identity. This is why nationalism works so well, right? I am American, or I am European, or whatever classification is that you give to yourself. People do seek an identity for which they can feel a sense of belonging with others in their group. And so, with that, if you can do that consciously from the beginning, then it will just go a long way. And it starts from, the name of the community, also to how they identify themselves as individuals. So as an example, we have, the pack. All right, so let's go back in. All right, so just back on this one, we have the pack, and the way that we identify people within the pack is packsters. But we actually got the community, we did a vote, right? So I asked the community, like, hey, how should we call ourselves moving forward? And then people put out a list of ideas. There was like packsters, packlings, and a whole bunch of other ones. And so then we listed it out, people voted, and then in that situation, the majority vote won. And so that has just stuck ever since, right? So if you get your community involved in what you're doing within this, gated environment, again, they feel part of the creation process. And so those are the future trends for online communities. And finally, I just wanted to leave you with this. To obtain something of equal value, something must be lost. Right? And, to obtain something of equal value must be lost. And this is from alchemy, right? So there's a first law of equal exchange. I believe that's what it's called. And essentially, it posits, or it makes it a law, right? That if you want something, you have to understand what it is that you are willing to lose or give up in exchange. This is the fair exchange aspect. And now you might think about, sometimes people use sort of the example of a seed to a tree, or even like, a flame, being able to provide more value that's not always equal. So, a single flame might be able to light up a whole bunch of other candles and spread that way. But, if you look a bit deeper, what is actually the cost of that flame is that it actually takes up more oxygen. So in the physical world, things are always being taken from somewhere. It's just that some things are not always as visible. And how that relates to gated communities is that, if you're wanting to create a community, The reason why the barrier to entry is actually something you might want to consider is that because it actually gives that person a sense of equal exchange or equal value. When people actually think that they're getting something for free, they tend not to value it as much. Whereas even if you put $1 towards something for an exchange, it's a form of commitment, right? I know a lot of people who might have commitment issues these days, but it's that when people have the dignity to provide some sort of proof of work, right? And money is a form of that work, right? So it's like we work, we make money, and the money is that end result, right, of the work. But there are other ways. And so, yeah, when you're going into a gated community, what you're doing is you're either giving your time, money, or effort in exchange for access to that group. And when you get in, by doing those things, you feel a greater sense of reward and dignity. And that's why gated communities work, and that's why I think it's going to be increasing more in 2020 as people, find themselves in isolation, and for all those other reasons that I just shared today. With that, would love to hear your thoughts. If you learn anything new, if you disagree, or if you just have other information that you might have come across that adds to today's topic, share it below in the comments. And thank you for watching. And as always, remember to like and subscribe. And through patience and persistence, it will come.
The eyes may be able to see, but without a heart, you cannot.